running this session and questions about which look at some profound aspects of Indian history. Neelima has written a terrific book which is about Kasturba, the secret diary of Kasturba Gandhi. Many in India and many around the world know about Mahatma Gandhi, but not many know about the woman who was an essential part of his life for almost 60 or 70 years. And we also have a book on the Rani of Jhansi regiment by Vera Hildebrand. This book is also important because I grew up in India, and from my school days I used to know about Subhash Chandra Bose, and I knew about Captain Lakshmi and the Rani of Jhansi regiment. But very few people have actually tried to probe and look deeply into who the women were, who the girls were. Many of them were under 18, who were attracted to the Indian National Army. So those are the two books that we will be talking about. While there are two books about the similar period of history in talking about coinciding with the struggle for India's independence, there is another interesting path where they diverge, because they are very different books. One draws on diaries of Kasturba and imagines how Kasturba would have seen the universe around her. The other is a straightforward, serious look at the period of the history, as well as talking to the women who are part of that history, extensive interviews and detailed reconstructions of specific events, almost with the zeal of an anthropologist and the style of a journalist. That's how I saw that. And I mean both as a compliment.
I take it as well.
Yeah. So there is, so let me start with Neelima, I think. What drew you, I mean, and before I ask Vera her first question, she will read from her book. And Neelima is going to read from her book a little bit, but at the time of a particular question. So let me start with you, Neelima. I think it's on.
Is it?
Yeah, I think it's on, yeah. What drew you to Kasturba, and is it another way of looking at Gandhi?
Thank you, Salil. Thank you, Vera. And thank you all friends who are here to listen to us speak. For me, this is actually a surreal, emotional moment, because I think this is the culmination of any writer's dream to be speaking at the Jaipur Lit Fest. I have nurtured Kastur for more than 14 years in my mind and my soul. Her journey, which has now fructified as late as October, where we launched her in New York, has brought me to this platform of Jaipur, where I am going to bring her alive in front of all of you. And there could not be a more life-defining moment for me, because it's Kastur, my passionate subject, who I've pursued intensely for so long, and it is on the front lawns of Jaipur. So both of that for me is my heart's dream come true. Before I go on to answering your question, Salil, I want to tell you that Kasturba has traveled from inside my womb straight to Hudson, where we launched her first in New York at the New York Lit Fest. And then she has taken this trail back to India. We went to Hyderabad, we went to Calcutta, we went to the Sabarmati, and now finally, and I hope this is not the last, we bring her journey to Jaipur to present her in front of you. So to begin with answering your question, Kastur has drawn me as a woman character who has been missing from the pages of history. And I have seen and read often about Gandhi, and reams and thousands of documents and biographies and pieces written on Gandhi, but the hugely conspicuously missing piece is about Kasturba. So I began searching on the life of Kasturba. After 3 or 4 years of intense research and internal churning, I tuned into her mind and her soul, and I virtually became Kastur. It was like at one of my book launches, a very erudite professor, Dinesh Singh, said of a Hindi writer who said that Ranjha Ranjha karti main bhi khud bhi Ranjha hui. So it was virtually as if I had adopted the life and form of Kastur. I lived and breathed and spoke and curled up and even died with her. So I entered that empty space, and the more I tuned into those silent cries, and I call them cries because here was a living voice, a voice that all historians had forgot and all Indians had ignored, that was crying to be heard. So the more I tuned into those cries, she came alive in my mind, and the more compelling I felt to resurrect her. So here is Kastur, who has taken, my work was actually really like that of a sculptor, or maybe I would say a potter, who shaped her and gave her the form that she comes presented in the pages of this diary today. And I have to admit that at many times I would say that the shape of Kastur in this diary is really that of my alter ego. And to answer the second part of your question, that is this another way of looking at Gandhi? Well, this is the story of Mohandas the man and not Gandhi the Mahatma.
That's a very good way of putting it. Thank you. Vera, would you like to read first and then I'll come to your first question? Or, yeah.
Sure. I have to give a little background. The Rani of Jhansi Regiment was a regiment of women soldiers who were trained as part of the INA in the Second World War, and they were deployed to Burma. Their purpose was to liberate India, and Subhash Chandra Bose was their commander. And what I'm going to read now is from the very end of the war. They are up in Burma. Subhash hears that or I should call him Netaji, hears that the Allies are just about to invade Rangoon, and he wants to make sure that the Ranis do not get captured. And he sends them back home. They didn't want to go. They wanted to stay and fight. But he made them get into various conveyances, and we are now on their fourth day of the retreat. And the nightfall on April 4, after resting at the Sitang River, the group of Ranis was ordered into one railway carriage for the onward escape towards Bangkok. It was dark, and the train was moving slowly through a paddy field, with the Ranis sitting on the carriage floor on their packs when the carriage was fired upon. Janaki Bai stressed to me, suddenly the bullets were whizzing past. I could feel the shooting flying over my head. I could not get up. It was the first time we were under enemy fire, said Rasama, one of the Ranis. But we had been trained. We knew to throw ourselves on the floor and stay down, although we could hear that somebody got hit. Punama felt overwhelmed by the smell of blood and by a voice moaning nearby in the dark. But they did not turn on their torches and could do nothing to help the wounded. All Ranis stayed quiet as the train accelerated in order to get out of the range of fire. Janaki Bai and Punama, sitting together, ducked low. Years later, Janaki Bai accounted to me because Punama, when she was nervous, she would both laugh and cry. I remember putting my hand over her mouth and putting her head down in the dust while they were shooting overhead. As soon as the firing stopped, the women turned on their torches. Sitting right next to Janaki Bai and Punama were two friends, Josephine and Stella. Janaki Bai still remembered the gruesome scene in detail. Josephine's brains had been blown out, but she died very quietly. It was a horrible sight. Next to her lay Stella Thomas, a Christian Rani and a large girl. She had been shot in the chest or in the arm, and she was bleeding profusely. Fortunately, no one else was hit. Several of the Ranis were trained nurses, but they had no means to help Stella and stop the massive loss of blood. Punama remembered, she would not die. She was in great pain, but she would not die. She was not married, and all we could do was pray. At dawn on April 5th, the train stopped at Champuri. The Ranis carefully carried Stella into an abandoned hut. Josephine was also brought into another hut, but where the Ranis cleaned her up, changed her clothes. In the morning light, a group of Ranis was detailed to bury Josephine in the jungle. The women also saw that the train carriage was blood splattered, and they cleaned it thoroughly. Stella was still alive and cried, unable to endure the pain. A Japanese doctor from the army camp at Champuri was called for, but as the group of Ranis was returning to the hut after burying Josephine, someone came running to say that Stella had also died. The two falling Ranis were buried in the jungle, side by side. Stella and Josephine were both Christian, and Lieutenant Janaki Bai was relieved that they could be given a dignified burial according to their religion without endangering the location of the whole group, as might have happened with rising smoke from a Hindu funeral pyre. Male cooks traveling with the Rani dug the two graves, and the women gathered wildflowers to decorate the simple burials.
Thank you. That's a very moving passage of a very harrowing scene of two of the Ranis dying in trenches during the conflict. How easy was it for you to get the Ranis to talk to you?
When I found them, it was extremely easy to have them talk. They were most eager to tell their stories. And they welcomed me. I would call up, and as soon as I had ascertained that indeed I had found a Rani, and I said...
Closer to the mouth. No, closer to your mouth. Yeah.
I said, are you a Rani? And is it such and such? And are you a Rani? And they said yes. And I said, I would like to come and interview you. And they said, oh yes. A few times they were a little unsure what this was all about. But as soon as I told them that I was going to write a book about their story, they were so eager to tell the story. And I promised them that I would write a book so that their stories would be known by others, because as is the title of this section, they were really left in silence. They contributed to the Indian freedom fight, and they went as great examples of modern women, and they were just never heard after the war. And I'm so glad to be here and tell about them.
Wonderful. No, I remember the name of the book that Peter Ward Fay had for the entire army, not just the Ranis. He called it The Forgotten Army, and to a great extent, the army had remained forgotten. So it's very good that these books indeed are coming out. I have a question for both of you briefly, which is that, is it easy to write about women in history, or seeing history from women's perspective? What I have in mind is, of course, Sunil Khildani has this book of 50 incarnations, which has, I believe, 6 women heroines. Ira Mukhoti has a new book out called Heroines, which looks at 8, 2 mythical and 6 historical figures, and looking at the role of women in history. Can marginalized voices, which include women, be best captured by women authors?
Now, this is my first venture writing about women in history.
Okay.
And yes, of course it's difficult to write about women because they have not been given nearly the attention that men have all through history. My original field was the Viking stories, and in those stories, women are very, very much more active participants. Maybe that's why I got inspired by the Ranis. But it's hard to write about women because they haven't been heard. So we hope that from now on, this will not be a problem.
No, I think that if you were to go just by history books, then clearly women have been marginalized by the historian. I remember a saying by Albert Einstein, the eminent physicist and philosopher, who about 75 years ago said about Gandhi that the generations to come will have a hard time believing that a man such as this walked the planet in flesh and blood. And what jumped out and hit me was that, hey, Einstein forgot. There was one woman who walked beside him, who took all the knocks that life gave him and he gave her. And there's a huge gap in that statement. So he was not the only man who walked in flesh and blood who we would not find easy to believe. There was Kasturba Gandhi, who was as difficult to believe as him. So I feel that the tenor of describing women, a woman's voice when she's talking about history, is definitely more incisive, and it's definitely less biased. And although I feel that men have always been the protagonist of historians. It's the story of a man written for a man. And women have been just incidental. They're either the mothers or the daughters or the descendants of the men who mattered. And what I have done in my narrative is I've just changed the focus, is that I have looked at the same story from the eyes of a woman at the other woman who was the shadow of that man. So by simply changing the focus and changing the narrative, we have changed a story, and changing of stories leads to changing the world. Because we tend to trickle down information down the generations with this bias. And yet I feel that although the tenor of a woman's voice is definitely more detailed and more encompassing, I would not yet give it a gender bias. Because there have been some extraordinary biographers, and biographers are also historians, who have done some extremely sensitive biographies. There have been some film producers, for instance, like Sanjay Leela Bhansali, who did Baji Rao. There couldn't have been a more sensitive portrayal of that. So I would say that it's just a matter of perspective. I would not say that men are not capable of being sensitive to women in history. We just have to sensitize them to that.
You both, sorry, go on.
I would like to add something to this. There is a difference between writing a novel about women, no matter what you base it upon. That is not, in my opinion, history. So we have to be careful. A novel, no matter how great it is and how true it feels, it's not history. When you talk to people, when you have them write their own history, then you get closer to history. And I think it's important to hold that thought, that history is not fiction. No. There must be a line between the two.
Let me just give you one single example before we move on to the next question, is Catherine Frank's biography on Indira Gandhi. Now, I think biographers are historians. They're niche historians, and they present stories of historic figures from their points of view. They may or may not be what the general perception is. So coming back to that, there is a very fine line of distinction between a biography and history, but I would put biographies into that category. So therefore, I feel that we should not allow this gender to categorize historians. And we should say that both the man and the woman should be judged with the equal measure, with the same lens when you're documenting facts. That's the point.
I have a question, because both of you deal with figures who are important in Indian history, Gandhi and Bose, in a sense. My first question is to you, Neelima, the imperfections of Gandhi. And I'm also curious whether the contemporary politics today in India play a role in deciding to write the book coming out at a particular time.
Let me take the second part of the question first. This book, Salil, I'm not a journalist and I'm not a historian. I'm a psychologist who has tried to unravel the mind of an iconic figure and everything that space encompasses. So there was never a predetermined or a premeditated plan of when to do the book. The idea for the book started in 2002. I stopped writing for a long time in the middle. 2-3 years I didn't write at all. And the book, I'm very fatalistic in my thoughts, so I believe that every book has a destiny, like a child, and every book has a predetermined horoscope and a time to be born. So it just happens that Kasturba has come at a time when we are ready to receive it. And, just yesterday, there's this young, very sprightly, bright young girl, Malika Dua, who's a comedian. She's a daughter of a very dear friend, and she was talking about body shaming. So I feel that relevant to that today is that women should be allowed to express themselves without the fear of being judged or put into a category of being thin or tall or smart or sexy or attractive or alluring. Why? It's an entity as beautiful or as powerful as that of a man. So in an age where our behavior is completely determined by these parameters, I think it's time that we gave somebody like Kasturba a voice, who was like, to look at visually the most unappealing woman maybe, khadi clad. There was no sex appeal in that sense of the word. But it's so timely, and it just happened by chance that we have resurrected Kasturba in a time where I think we are ready to receive that. So I'll take the second part of the question. Gandhi, much like my father, Vera asked me when we were talking about our books, she said, do you like Gandhi? And what I told her is, yes, I do. I see Gandhi as this deeply split down the middle character like my father, R.K. Dalmia. So I revere and adore and worship Gandhi, the secularist, Gandhi, the freedom fighter, Gandhi, the self-righteous leader, the one who gave us our freedom, all of that. I respect that as much as I respect my father, the industrialist, the super achiever, the person who came from his rags to riches story. But I hate Gandhi, the father, and Gandhi, the husband, just as much as I despised Gandhi, my father, the father, and I despised R.K. Dalmia, the husband to my mother. So, to come back to that, Gandhi's personality, from what I have seen in this, and if we keep away the other side, which everybody knows is the Messiah, who I don't dispute, is full of imperfections. And I'll quickly go over 3 or 4 points. Let's start with the childhood. He's married at 12 to a girl of 13 who comes from a wealthier family than him. He is ridden with complexes, he's insecure, he's jealous, he's controlling, he's overpossessive, he doesn't want to let her flower, whereas she's confident, she's smart, she's a passionate woman, she's proactive, she has a sexual mind. So he's doubting her sincerity, and eventually that leads to this unilateral vow of celibacy, which he just throws at her. That, we, from today, you and I are no longer husband and wife. So I think that cruelty, and to me, emotional cruelty is the worst form of violence. So coming from a man whose life and soul was, the core tenet was non-violence, the emotional atyachar, if you want to call it, that he unleashed on his wife and children was in serious contradiction with his spiritual message. Then let's come to his... of course, I've come to the vow of celibacy. Then the distinction he made, he had 2 sets of rules. He did not preach by example. He took the vow of celibacy, but he was constantly in the company of women, some of whom he admittedly had immense infatuation for, and that infatuation wasn't spiritual, according to me. Then we come back to his treatment of his children. He himself had a degree of a law degree in England, and he did not allow his children to study. That you go to Bapu's class, and the only education you need is character building. And one of them questions that what kind of character building am I getting, and how will that earn me a livelihood in my life? So another contradiction. Are you saying something?
I had a question for Vera about it.
I'm just going to finish this by saying, and the last thing, which is the most brutalizing of his faults, I think, is his odious experiments with sexuality. I'll come to that later, but Vera, you take this question, but I think he was a great messiah, but like all messiahs and all iconic leaders, he had one dark side to him, which was extremely odious.
Yeah. Thank you. Vera, the question I have for you is about Bose's imperfections. You have questioned and taken a critical look at his political choices, his lack of experience in military. He liked to wear a uniform, but he was no military strategist. And the strategic mistakes he made, particularly the way he wanted to wage the war. You also show his faith in Indian women by having the Rani of Jhansi regiment, but also show how paternalistic he was towards them. He almost was like a father figure for them. He wanted them to be protected by male soldiers and so on. Reflecting on the politics around Bose, how do you view him as a man?
Great question. Today, by the way, is the 120th anniversary of Bose's birth.
Wow.
I'm very, you were talking about the birth of a book, so this is a very auspicious day for me to talk about him. Bose was a complicated man. I do not believe that there was anything odious about him. He was a great intellect. He was years ahead of his time. He was a passionate nationalist. He wanted India to be free. He wanted Indian women to be equal. And he said women in new free India should have equal rights and equal responsibility. There was nothing about sex, pretty, anything. You had to work. You had to be willing to fight for what you wanted. And boy, he has my heart in that. He was very young. He could not possibly have had experience in everything that he did, but he saw the opportunity when, as he said himself, when he wanted to join his enemy's enemy because they became his friend. And when he saw the Germany and Japan going against the British, this was his window of opportunity. Unfortunately, he was not the only one who decided how the INA should be deployed. He had to work together with the Japanese, and they were in a terrible muddle about what they should do on the India-Burma border. And he couldn't progress on his own, so he came in too late in the war to make the difference that he wanted. He had great plans. He wanted to cross the border, and the Ranis would be the first to go across, so that they would show Indians in India on the mainland, and especially the Indian soldiers who fought for the British. He said, when these soldiers see brave Indian women, trained, able to fight, they will lay down their weapons and they will join us. And he was firmly convinced that some inspiration, the Ranis, would convert, would make Indians realize we shouldn't fight for the British, we should fight for our own liberty. And the Ranis believed him every step of the way. And so it didn't work out the way he had hoped and the way that many, many people hoped that it would. But he must be given all our admiration that he had the idea and he gave his all, he gave his life to doing this, and I think it's so admirable.
My next question is about the treatment of women of Gandhi. Your book clearly lays out that he was not very gender sensitive, to use the contemporary term today, and looking at him from today's light, he doesn't come across looking very good. And yet we find millions of women over the years revere him. Why? What does it tell us about Indian society?
Gandhi's unconscious, I would say, influence in his life, which firmly, which determined his attitude to women. Subconsciously, it was his mother. That Putliba's saintliness was what he perceived, as a quintessential, the mother, the Hindu Nari, the Ardhangini, the helpmate. So that was the core of his attitude towards women. But again, there is a dichotomy in this, because Gandhi's attitude towards every other woman was different from his singular attitude towards his wife. And basically, fundamentally, Gandhi believed that women are far more strong and persevering than men. He said that because every woman is born with this innate feeling of sacrifice and devotion, and he felt that women are the incarnation of ahimsa, and they're capable of extreme, infinite love and sacrifice and devotion. So he thought that they were ideal at that time to be pursuing and following him in his mission of satyagraha and truth and ahimsa. And the most radical of his beliefs and his actions was when he incited the women in these conservative homes to come out and to join the movement and to follow him in his path of non-violence and of civil disobedience against the British, in which sometimes they were jailed, or often they were jailed. And at that time, the greatest stigma a woman could have from her near and dear ones and the family and society was if she was in the company of another man, even for a day outside her house. So the fact that he was able to incite those women and it was accepted by society was a huge social change. So I think that was positive. But I think that Gandhi, the basic core personality of Gandhi was he was a banya. And in modern parlance today, he would have been a brilliant CEO of some conglomerate, assigning, he knew who was good for what. He could assign, his wife was given the duty to look after the ashram, to come out when it was necessary, court arrest, and people would follow her. The other women, the other men, he allocated jobs according to their abilities. So in that, he was extremely astute. But again, if you come out to the most I would say, drastic fallout of his attitude to women was this callousness he had in his experiments with celibacy. And what is really brutally, like it just baffles you and it can brutalize the sturdiest of minds, is when he decided to pick women from within the ashram, and some of them from his own family as young as 18 and 20 years old, who he chose to be guinea pigs in his sexual laboratory, where he chose to make them lie naked with him to test his own celibacy. So that in consideration, because to them Gandhi was the God. They were surrendering themselves, body and soul, at the feet of the God. He could do as he pleased with them. They would do it. They were in like a hypnotic trance. So nobody ever mentions what were the psychological ramifications of those experiments. And to give you one small incident which I researched, I found that the single follow-up study has been done on Manu, in which she was found at the age of 40 in a hospital in Pune. And Manu was 18 years old. She was unmarried. She was the grandchild of one of Gandhiji's brothers. And she was found in an extremely incapacitated condition. She had a rash all over her body. She was incoherent, and the doctors, and Morarji Desai went to see her, and the doctors told him that she has some idiopathic illness which has not come from her body. It's in the mind. So I think that is a very telling statement on what I'm trying to say. So in that, his attitude towards women bordered on cruelty.
Yeah.
I think it was in consideration. He was so consumed by his own cause that he didn't think of them.
Vera, I have a question about class actually now, because one of the interesting things I find in your writing is how you have shown how the Rani of Jhansi regiment actually puts together a vast range of Indians cutting across class and ethnic groups. I mean, you have Bengalis, you have Tamils, you have Gujaratis, Christians, Jains, Muslims, and Sikh women. And yet there is a class differential, isn't it, between the Tamil, so-called Tamil illiterates and those who are well educated. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure, but first I would like to talk about the women of the Rani of Jhansi regiment. These were real women who joined up to do something that they thought would benefit them, not only themselves, but everybody. And they were not used. They signed up as active participants in a movement. And I think that we have to remember, they were not victims. And that's why I think the story of the Ranis should be known. They were not victims. They did not see themselves certainly as victims. They saw themselves as real fighters for the future. And we should remember that there are women who did that. And yes, to come to your question, there were from all castes, language backgrounds, from all religions, they came. And that's rather remarkable. And Bose said that in the INA, everyone was equal. So everybody ate together, ate the same food. Of course, vegetarians didn't have to eat the occasional bit of fish, but they shared the same food. They each had their opportunity to observe their religion, but that was done in private. They were all together. And the women later, when I asked them, so you have had a good life, how do you look back on your time as a Rani? And every one of them said, that was the best 2 years of my life. I worked together with other women. We exhausted ourselves. We fought for something great. And they said that there were no squabbles. They were not. They didn't fight. Of course, they told occasionally that somebody was a bit misbehaving, but that was all taken care of. And since I asked everyone the same question, and nobody would say that there had been any racial, any religious, any other kind of discrimination, I have to believe them that they worked together. Yes, there were some that most of the Ranis were completely illiterate. They came from upper Malayan plantations and had never been to school. And then there were some very well-educated women who had finished college, especially the women who were recruited in Burma. And Bose had made the rule that officers had to have a 8th grade education. That was necessary, he deemed, to be able to read maps and take instructions and so on. So the officers were all well-educated women. But one of the women, Punama, that I spent a lot of time with, she said, oh, I didn't speak Tamil, but I learned some Tamil. And I like to spend the time with my soldiers. She was a lieutenant. And they had fun together across education, race, religion, everything. And that was Bose's command, that is how it was supposed to be in the INA. And he was, again, way ahead of his time with this.
I've just been told we have time for a couple more questions before we turn to the audience. So one to you, and if you can keep it brief. Neelima, India seems to have rejected Gandhi in many ways. India is one of the largest standing armies in the world, which Gandhi wouldn't approve of. It is a nuclear power, which Gandhi wouldn't approve of. It is an urban society, which Gandhi wouldn't approve of. And it prefers industry and not handicrafts and agriculture, which Gandhi also wouldn't approve of. Why does India still revere him if he was such an unpleasant husband and father? Or did he have certain innate qualities which were so noble that they captured the Indian imagination?
Gandhi arrived on the scene in India when we were struggling under the yoke of the British rule. We were a society oppressed and we were slaves of the British, so to speak. So he came at a time when he was able to tap into that sentiment and to stoke that national pride and to salvage that bruised ego. And he was able to galvanize everybody under one single banner to fight for freedom. So at that time, his relevance was profound. But today, Gandhi's principles of either Satya or Ahimsa or Brahmacharya hold no relevance for us today. He is reduced to merely tokenism. The new age generation, which believes in instant gratification, has no use for Gandhi's principles. And so Gandhi is only used as a name by political parties to gain their ever mileage, or to slapstick comedies, unfortunately, like Munna Bhai, who brings alive Gandhi once in a few years, or the abiding image that our generation probably has of Richard Attenborough's biopic. So today, Gandhi remains hugely irrelevant, and sadly so, because I still feel that if we draw on the strength of his truth and the strength of his steadfastness, we could still distill the goodness what brought Gandhi into India, and we could still benefit from it. But on the face of it, if you ask my children's generation, for instance, and I have to admit, I'm not ashamed of saying that, is that after reading my book, the little they knew of Gandhi, everybody says, oh God, we hate him. So if that is any statement, I think I've exasperated or exacerbated, I'm saying that wrong, that feeling. And one of the sweetest things I got was a Twitter message from somebody who said that after reading your book, we want the face of Kasturba on that note and not Gandhi on the currency note. And the other smartest thing I heard was from my friend Dr. Shashi Tharoor, who said that what you have done is you have given Kasturba an Adhar card. So I take great pride in that. And
lovely. Vera, also a question about the larger political ramifications. There is this fantasy in India that if only the INA had succeeded and if it had marched to Delhi, as it said, Chalo Delhi, it would have been a different country had Bose survived. Maybe there wouldn't have been partition and he would have led India to a different kind of a nation. And yet when Captain Lakshmi did stand for presidential elections a few years ago, she lost. She lost comprehensively, both the left and the right, except for the left as in the communists, but the UPA on one side and the BJP voted against her. Did Bose really capture the imagination of India, or is this just a part of Indian fantasy?
I'll start with Captain Lakshmi, or Lakshmi Sehgal. She said to me, yeah, I ran for office. I knew I wasn't going to win. Everybody else had coalesced, but I thought that we had to have a leftist representation. So she was just, I think, was she 92 when that happened? She was full of energy, and she just thought that no. She couldn't just give in to the BJP. But I don't know enough about Indian society, but I know what Bose said, and he thought that India needed a very firm ruler. Bose was criticized for being a fascist, and when he was criticized thus, he said, no, I didn't mean fascism, I meant socialism. And he said that there would, in a free India, with him at the helm, there would be some years with autocratic rule. Now, who knows how that would have been, but he had all sorts of plans. He had planned the economy, he had printed money, he had printed stamps, he had planned the postal system, and so on and so forth. So he was a man for an orderly India. And I don't think anybody can say how that would have worked. But the Ranis certainly grieved that it was not Bose who was the first prime minister. They thought that he deserved it, they wanted it, and they kept the dream alive. That doesn't mean they all thought that he did die. They didn't believe that he would come back afterwards. They said that if he was alive, he would have come. He would not have left everybody looking for him. He would not have stayed in a cave contemplating life. He would have come and he would have done what was possible.
I lived in Singapore for some years as a journalist and had the opportunity to meet Captain Lakshmi and listen to the oral histories. Two things that struck me from my time there when he formed the INA about this whole idea of national integration, that there were no food barriers. You did not have, beef was served, pork was served. Soldiers had to eat what was on their plate because soldiers need food, and he was not going to have separate messes. And the other thing he did, which was also very interesting, is that the newspaper that he ran, Azad Hind Times, was in Roman script, not in Devanagari, which would have alienated the Muslim soldiers, nor in Gurmukhi, which would have alienated the Hindu and Muslim soldiers, and nor in Devanagari, which would have alienated the other two. But he opted for something else. So that's a remarkable aspect of the way he tried to meld and create an Indian identity, which is something worth noting on today, his birth anniversary. I have time for questions for about 10 minutes, and I'm going to ask for questions from all parts. So I've got 5 hands in the front. One. Let me start with the one at the back. The gentleman there, then the lady in the blue sari, the schoolboy over there, yeah? And anyone right at the back? Yes, the gentleman there. Let's start with those 4. Please keep them very brief so that I can have one more round. Yeah.
My question, hi, this is Atharva here. My question is to both of you. How do you find the voice or tone of the character or person that you are writing about?
I will answer that. It was very easy. I asked the Ranis questions. I asked them to describe their lives. I asked them to tell me how they were before the war, why they signed up, and what they did during the war, and what they did after the war. And my book is their answers. I didn't interpret. I didn't change it. I chose the important answers that they gave, and that's what my book is. So the voice of my book is the Rani's voices.
I think my task was even easier because the voice of Kasturba is my voice. It is because I became Kasturba and I lived and I breathed and I ate and I experienced all the pain and all the exaltation that she got. So I think Vera has done a far more difficult job than me. It was me speaking as Kastur.
Lady, please keep it brief because, yeah, there'll be one here, then the schoolboy, and then there was one more question. Then if time permits, I'll come back. If time permits.
Good morning, Vera ma'am. This question is to you that I read somewhere that you said that it was the British intelligence who gave you the information about the Ranis rather than the Indian historians, sorry. So how difficult it was, can you just elaborate the process, how difficult it was to get the information on all these Ranis who have no history in Indian history?
Yes, the reason that it is most of the information from archives is the British is that Bose was very successful in destroying all paper trails. The private papers in New Delhi have what is left after the destruction, and it's very little. So when I started interviewing the Ranis, first, because they were already old ladies, I wanted to get their stories. And I visited them many times, and I talked to them for days and days. And so I had their stories. Then I thought I would like to put them in a greater context. And I started looking. I went to Singapore, the archives. They had some stories in their all history library of Singapore citizens who had reported about seeing the Ranis in Singapore. Some people from Burma had come to India and had told the stories. But I went to a British Library in London, and I searched and searched and searched, and my big discovery was some boxes of documents that had not been located before. And I found them only because a librarian sent me an anonymous note calling him or herself Fräulein X, and said, the papers you are looking for about the INA, they are in the British Library, and they are in some sealed boxes saying INA. And when I got that email, I promised I would not try to find out who the library worker was who gave the secret away. But I managed to get the chief librarian to find them and catalog them. And in these British intelligence reports, there were, I should just tell what they were. The British, whenever an INA soldier was caught, defected, or at the end of the war, they were snatched up and they were interrogated. There were 23,000 interrogation reports. Some of them, not all of them, but many, many of them came, the most interesting ones, came to the mentioning Rani. Soldiers about the Ranis, and I got the opinion of interrogators asking the soldiers, because to the British they couldn't quite understand what they did, and they wanted to learn, and therefore there were many interrogations mentioning, asking questions about the Ranis, and that I have incorporated. But it is mostly just the stories of the women themselves and the British reports, because there isn't anything else.
Yeah, the schoolboy there, please.
My name is Yuvraj and I am from Presidency School. My question is to Ma'am Neelima. How did you get to know so much about Kasturba Gandhi, and what things helped you and even hindered you in your way?
That's an interesting question because it was difficult to find any material on Kasturba because, as I said before, she's been largely ignored and forgotten by historians. So my main source of information was this book written by Arun and Sunanda Gandhi, her grandson and his wife, called The Forgotten Woman. So the mainstay of the story comes from there. Other parts of the story, the events, are from history, from Gandhi's own biography, his own autobiography, Experiments with Truth. And the challenge was in filling the gaps. So to make that quantum leap into the unknown and to take on that life form, and then to give it a shape and to understand and recreate those emotions was the challenge and the hindrance. And I wouldn't even call it a hindrance because I enjoyed doing it. Thank you.
I have 5 more minutes. I had one question I'd already identified. So if we can go back to the person who had put his hand up, and I'll take 2 more, and one by one, please keep it sentence and not longer. The lady in pink and the lady in the front row. And I'll have to stop there, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, sir. I am from CBSE, New Delhi. Bobby, talking to you. I would like to ask a question to Neelima. Do you think that the shades of Gandhi in your book are similar to today's society? We can see many Gandhis all around ourselves.
Can you wait? Let's have the second question too now. Yeah, please.
You've been talking like a psychologist, and you said you have written the book as a psychologist. But I'm really wondering how a psychologist could use the words like hate and despise and not, use it with more understanding. And then you are very smilingly telling me that your children hated Gandhi. This is my great objection.
As a psychologist, you have to deal with all kinds of emotions. And hate and envy and jealousy and suspicion and everything form the whole spectrum of human emotions. You cannot get emotional about it, you have to be clinical about it. And if a certain incident has evoked a strong hatred, antipathy in somebody, it's human to do that. Kasturba was a human being. She was his wife. She had the right to hate him. Like you have the right to despise something which you find odious in your life. So as a psychologist, I think I have been true to my stream. Thank you.
And the other question was about, are there many Gandhis among us?
I think Gandhi forms one epitome of a character with many shades. And there is one Gandhi in each one of us. There's one in me too. And I would not like to reveal which Gandhi is inside me. So I think that answers it, because we are all not one single person. We're an amalgamation of personalities which filter down to us from our nurturing and our environment.
Okay, we have 2 more minutes, so very briefly I'll take 1 sentence long questions. The gentleman towards the back with glasses and the gentleman in the front here. But please keep it very brief, because otherwise, you know, they won't invite me next year to do this.
This is for Neelima. Again, from a psychologist's point of view, do you think if Gandhi was a better husband, he would have been a worse national leader?
This is true of all hugely iconic men. And I equate one of my father as one of the hugely iconic men that I have lived in close contact with. And history has proven that they have all had wretched personal lives. So I think this is a fait accompli. If you have somebody in your life who is such a big hero in whichever field, then you have to bear with all the other dark shades that come with this.
Hi, I just wanted to ask you, is it really fine to have an opinion about people who we can actually not meet? Because what actually Kasturba felt about Gandhi and what Gandhi was into, is it actually possible for a non-Gandhi to decipher that? Is it really justice to that?
I have not tried to make a moral judgment, any kind of justification. When I started writing the book, I had promised myself that my role will be like that of Sanjay in the Mahabharata, that I am going to make that leap into the unknown and dig out facts which I think as a wife and a daughter and a child and a mother I would have felt. So I don't think I have crossed the line of justice in bringing that out, because like I said, as a wife, I have a right to an opinion against my husband if I find it disagreeable with me and odious with me.
Thank you, everyone, and my apologies to all those wonderful hands which were up and I couldn't take you in. The message from this session is this, that it's right to revere leaders, but let's not make them into icons, because men of steel, and I say this consciously, men of steel, sometimes are feet of clay. Thank you.